Guys, if you can find one mistake in the Quran, I will leave Islam right now.
So there are many errors in the Quran, but for the sake of brevity, we will just look at a couple. So in Surah 86, 6-7, the Quran says that semen comes from between a man's backbone and rib cage. This is a mistake. Semen does not come from a man's back. In Surah 96:2, the Quran says that in the embryo process, humans begin as a clot of blood. This is an error. At no stage in the human developmental process are we a clot of blood. In Surah 23:14, the Quran says that Allah first makes the skeleton of a person and then clothes them with flesh. That is an error. We know how humans develop, and that's not it. In Surah 18:86-90, the Quran says that the sun sets into a muddy pool, and that this muddy pool is somewhere that a human can visit. That's nonsense. The sun is a giant ball of fire in the sky that is much bigger than the earth. I could go on, but I think you get the point.
This book has never been changed.
So this is false as well for roughly 3 reasons. First, early Islamic history explicitly tells us that there has been changes in the Quran and that many verses have been lost. I have a video pinned at the top of my channel where I go into this in depth, so I'll just point you to that. Second, we have early manuscripts of the Quran in which we can see where people changed the text. Let me give you a couple of examples. Dan Brubaker is a scholar of the Quran who wrote a short book where he examined some of the changes that occur in the early Quranic manuscripts. On your screen, you will see some early Quranic manuscripts where we can see where people erased a word in the Quran and wrote something different over it, where a later scribe came and wrote a word in the margins or next to the other words, or where a word is erased and then another word is wrote longer so as to take up the space. This brings us to the third way we know the Quran has been changed, which is that through the existence of textual variants, even amongst manuscripts that don't show signs of tampering, like the ones I just showed you, we can still see differences between various different manuscripts, which indicate that the Quran went through a process of revision and change. Keith Small, who is a scholar specializing in textual criticism, speaks of the Quran and says, though Muslims may take pride in the fidelity of the preservation of this text, it does not reproduce precisely what was originally considered to be the Quran in the early 7th century. Because of the standardizations of the text in 653 to 705 and 936, together with the constant pressure throughout Islamic history to have one text match their dogma, many texts which had equally good claims to containing authentic readings were suppressed and destroyed, and because of the emphasis on oral transmission and the vagaries of Arabic as it developed, the written text was constantly vocalized in new ways which did not preserve the original vocalization. The original vocalization must have been lost very early on if it did indeed exist. While bearing testimony to the careful preservation of one particular consonantal text, the history of the transmission of the text of the Quran is at least as much a testament to the destruction of Quran material as it is to its preservation. It is also a testimony to the fact that there never was one original text of the Quran.